we have one of four choices to reduce the dissonance, because it doesn't make any difference. If you're presented with new truth, it's going to cause some dissonance. So you really only have one of four options. So welcome to Life as God Intended. And of course, I'm Don. Glad you've tuned in today, and I'm delighted to have with me in the studio Caleb Baker.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Don.
Caleb's always behind the scenes because kind of refer to him as my producer, and he's the one that edits the videos and gets them ready for the broadcast. So does the great job of putting pictures and little videos inside the videos. So
thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
So today he's going to join me, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more of a discussion.
Yeah, so I think today our topic is on cognitive dissonance, and the topic of cognitive dissonance and how it pertains to Christian belief. And so, Don, would you mind by kind of defining that for us?
Yeah, that would probably be a good place to start because just the name itself, cognitive dissonance, might be something that the average individual isn't familiar with. And
right.
So it's typically a term that describes the state of discomfort felt when two or more types of thoughts contradict each other. So I think we can all relate to that aspect.
Right.
And then what that contradiction causes in us, it causes a person to experience a sense of dissonance or emotional discomfort. And it's those clashing thoughts that, could be a result of ideas or beliefs or the knowledge that a person's had about something or how they behaved a certain way. And now this new information's come to the forefront, and it's causing them this dissonance, it's causing them this discomfort. So really, the dissonance is a lack of agreement. So what I was currently thinking and believing is now being confronted with something that I'm not familiar with, and it's causing this lack of agreement in my mind between the truth of what I have been believing, and it can really cause discomfort because it causes what we might refer to as kind of an inconsistency, not only between my beliefs or what I'm holding on to as far as what I believe is true, but also it can cause a discomfort or a dissonance in one's actions or behaviors based on my beliefs. In other words, I've been behaving a certain way based on what I believed. All of a sudden now I'm being presented with this concept, this truth. I'm not even sure it's true. And if it's true, it's going to affect the way I behave.
Right. Yep.
And that's causing me some discomfort.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see how this is especially important, this topic of cognitive dissonance. It's really important for Christians in attempting to, sort out what we believe as Christians, and also the behaviors then that we follow through because of our beliefs. Absolutely,
absolutely. The Christian life is obviously the Christ life, and behavior is the outworking of his life as ours. But this cognitive dissonance is all about the consequences of inconsistency.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any Christian that isn't concerned about the inconsistencies
right.
in their life.
Yep.
And so, we all prefer consistency in contrast to inconsistency. And so we prefer consistency, obviously, to inconsistency. And we work hard to maintain or restore consistency among our cognitions or our perspectives. So in other words, when there isn't consistency, it bothers us. And, we try to restore that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think so. So with that, with some of the cognitive dissonance that we're talking about, would you be able to give us some examples of kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, there certainly are lots of them. Let me give a simple one. I think it's generally accepted that people that smoke cigarettes, for example, They know that smoking causes cancer. I don't know that you could live in this world today and not know that, the Surgeon General's got it right on every pack of cigarettes.
Pretty much a fact, yeah.
And yet, they are in a state of cognitive dissonance because they're still choosing, in spite of the information, in spite of the truth, to continue to smoke. And so this cognitive dissonance often then causes anxiety, and that's probably, most smokers would say, well, that's why I smoke, because I've got anxiety. So when this new information, these facts, does not line up with our current beliefs, it causes this dissonance. And we may find ourselves attempting to diminish the new information. In other words, we don't really like what we're hearing, and so we create excuses in an attempt to justify our behavior. So for the smoker, and I'm not picking on smokers, we all have something we're struggling with. And so they would try to justify why they smoke, to lessen the anxious feelings that they're dealing with, so that our minds would stay in harmony with our existing beliefs, and that we'd be okay. We'd be comfortable with what we're believing and what we're doing relative to our beliefs.
Yeah, Don, I can kind of see how this cognitive dissonance can pose a real challenge for people who are maybe more religious Christians, who kind of just to try to justify themselves based on the law and being good enough and all these kind of things.
Yeah, that's a great point, Caleb. And those of anybody that's listened to my broadcast long enough knows that I differentiate between Christianity and religion. They are not the same. Christianity is not a religion, and Christianity is not being religious. Christianity obviously is Christ. And so you're exactly correct. The cognitive dissonance poses a real challenge to the religious Christian, because the thought that's being presented is kind of outside of their accepted safe boundaries, and this new thought, if it in fact it turns out to be truth, this truth then begins to challenge my religious beliefs. And religious people have this, this system of beliefs that they're staking their whole life on. And when that's challenged, they don't know what to do, because they haven't maybe quite learned to live out of or from who they are in Christ. And so that's what our whole ministry is based on, trying to encourage Christians to experience the outlived life of Jesus. And so Christians have tended to kind of self-justify their own religious beliefs, because, we're staking our lives on it. And so when contradictory evidence is presented, sometimes we don't know what to do with it, and that's this whole subject we're talking about. And despite, and here's where the rub comes in, despite the potential truthfulness of the new idea. You see, cognitive dissonance refuses, it rejects to accept the possibility of having to change one's mind. I'm not very comfortable about you sharing this with me. That doesn't fit my belief system. It's challenging me to change my mind, and instead I choose to dwell in ignorance rather than truth, to remain in a state of self-justification. Even, and this is where it gets really bad, even if it means lying to myself. Now, look, I think any of us that have lived long enough would admit that we've all experienced this
been there.
some level. I certainly have.
Yep.
So here we are lying to ourselves as an option of not facing reality. What's the reality? I've been presented with a truth that I wasn't aware of. It's making me uncomfortable because it's challenged me to think differently and, as a corresponding, act differently or behave differently. And so they may even go to the extreme of only exposing or themselves or absorbing information that affirms their pre-existing beliefs. In other words, I'm only going to read what I know that corresponds with what I believe. I'm not going to expose myself to things outside of that realm. No, I'm not suggesting, you go outside of the Christian realm. I'm just saying there's plenty of discussion within Christian circles that doesn't always agree with each other. Are we open-minded to allow God to expand our thinking?
Right. And, I think this brings up a pretty important question for us. And I think that is, what should a Christian do when they're presented with, this new information that may not fit their current beliefs?
Yeah, that's a great, hopefully, that's a question we're asking. Because oftentimes especially, the more rigid or fundamental that we are, we don't want to entertain those. And so, actually, we have one of four choices to reduce the dissonance, because it doesn't make any difference if you're presented with new truth. It's going to cause some dissonance. So you really only have one of four options. First, you may integrate the new truths and change your beliefs accordingly. And that, of course, would be what I believe that God would have us to do. In other words, God's revealing something to us, and we're willing to change our minds about what we were believing. Secondly, the individual may intellectualize using logic to fit the new idea into their existing way of thinking. So now we're going to put a square peg in a round hole. That doesn't fit.
Right. Yep.
But that's typically, we're going to intellectualize it, Well, it really means such and such. I can remember when I first came to this particular ministry and began to be presented with the Christ life, I did just that. I tried to fit those concepts into my pre-existing understanding of God, and it obviously didn't work. The third choice that an individual would have is that they might revert to arguing. Boy,
Yep.
Does that not happen or what?
That definitely does. I've been on the receiving end of it.
Exactly. So they're going to explain why they're right and you're wrong, and that the new idea isn't what you think it is, and that's going to somehow reduce their dissonance because, we're trying to be right. The fourth choice is to attack or to attempt to discredit the choice of dissonance to reduce the burden of the mental discord that I'm facing. And that is very unfortunate, because now, we're trying to actually attack someone's credibility or character, which is obviously not even Christian.
So then, Don, what's been your observation then as to how people respond when their status quo beliefs are challenged with information that are kind of outside of their current understanding?
Yeah. Well, if we're honest, we would all ask the question, when posed with information that contradicts what we're currently believing, what is truth? Is there anything wrong with asking that question? What is truth? As with everything in the Christian life, when we ask the question, what is truth, we should be focusing on the person who makes us Christian, Jesus Christ himself. And we should derive our understanding of truth from Christ, the person of truth. And then our behavior should be the corresponding expression of his character. So that's what we should find ourselves doing. And the reality here is that everything that is real truth is Jesus Christ. If you're believing something outside of what's consistent with Jesus, it's not truth. I don't care how strong you believe it.
Nope.
And that's because of what Jesus said. It's recorded there in John's Gospel, chapter 1 and verse 17, where he said, grace and truth were realized in Jesus Christ. In other words, what did John mean when he said that? Grace and truth were realized. That grace and truth were made known. Grace and truth was revealed. Grace and truth was inaugurated in the person of Jesus Christ. He is truth. And so what that also tells us is that a revelation and an awareness are needed. Now, both revelation and an awareness. And so when our eyes are opened to a reality of what we were previously unaware of, that's what revelation is. And God is revealing himself as the truth, as to who he is and how it pertains to us. And it is during these times of revelation that there is an enlightening. There's an enlightening to something and hopefully to someone. We're becoming made aware of something new to us. And this awareness of previously unknown or unnoticed truth. Sometimes it's, hiding in plain sight.
Right. We just can't see it.
We just didn't see it,
Yep.
And so we're being enlightened to something that is not as it ought to be in our lives. Sometimes God's lovingly convicting us, like, Don, this is not consistent with who you are in me. And so this behavior, where's it coming from? And so whether it's an awareness of what is wrong or whether it's an awareness of an opportunity to make something right, both can invoke strong feelings, and we may be tempted with cognitive dissonance at those very moments.
Right. So I think what we've talked about so far, we've discussed kind of how people can respond whenever they're confronted with something that challenges their beliefs. But how does denial factor into cognitive dissonance? How do we address that?
Yeah, it certainly does. Denial, I think, factors into our lives a whole lot more than we would probably be aware of. And so, obviously, denial is not an appropriate option for the Christian. It's a flesh pattern of sin. We all have different ways of denying things to try to shelter ourselves and protect ourselves when we become uncomfortable with things that we're having to face. And so when presented with truth that's outside of the realm of our current understanding, we may be tempted. Let's just put it out there. We will be tempted. And we'll be tempted to do what? To compartmentalize. To compartmentalize these unwelcome thoughts. Sometimes I've kiddingly said, when God's speaking to me, is that the devil? It's obviously not the devil. It's just the loving admonitions of the Lord. And so we may seek to explain away the truth. That's a form of denial. Because it doesn't fit our current theology. And I've often said, look, if your theology is the same as it was 10 years ago, the likelihood is you're in denial. Because God is continually revealing himself to us, and we're having a more full understanding of the truth of who he is and who we are. And so the opposing truth that challenges our set beliefs often causes this dissonance. And when you and I are presented with new truths that challenge your deeply held beliefs, you gotta be careful about pride. Just because I've believed it and been living my life based upon it, I've got to be humble enough to admit, I could have been wrong, or I could have had an incomplete understanding. And so sometimes we may be motivated to resolve the negative feelings by rejecting the new information as, oh, that's just crazy. That's outlandish. I can't believe anybody would have that viewpoint. Been there, done that.
Right.
In an attempt to ease the cognitive dissonance without fully possessing and processing the information to even ascertain whether this new information is truthful.
Do you have some practical examples that you could share on this?
There are so many, but if I could keep it simple, I would say that when a Christian tells a lie and is convicted for doing so, that they feel that uncomfortable. Because obviously when we lie, we're trying to cover up something, we're trying to act in a way that's inconsistent with who we're acting out Satan's character. We're fearful of the truth and what the consequences of telling the truth might be. And so we feel uncomfortable about it because we know that spiritually I am an honest person. I'm not a liar. And so then we may experience this cognitive dissonance. And this inconsistent behavior will then cause mental discord. Now what am I going to do, you see? There's a contradiction between the lie that I just told and the truth of who I am in Christ. Now, if I'm truly aware of and receptive to Christ, I'm going to admit it. I'm going to confess, you know what? I lied. I was wrong. And so the cognitive dissonance is knowing the one thought, in this case, knowing that I told a lie, and on the other, knowing that I am an honest person. You see, there's that conflict between the two thoughts. And Jesus warns us that, none of us can serve two masters. We're confronted with this on a daily basis, aren't we?
We are. Yep.
And we're going to love the one and hate the other, Matthew chapter 6. And so Jesus also said, or I should say James admonishes us in his epistle, that when we pray, we must believe and not doubt. Well, guess what? A lot of times the reason we're praying is because we're being tempted to doubt.
Yep.
It's real practical.
Right.
Because he who doubts, James says, is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind, and should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord. So once again, if I'm just holding on to my set beliefs, and now the Lord's speaking into my life something new, something truthfully fresh, and I'm struggling with it, what am I going to do with that?
Well, yeah, Don, I think this topic that we're discussing is so important, for Christians to address and to really figure out, where they're at with it. And I think cognitive dissonance can show up in so many different areas of life, whether it's, temptation with sin or in relationships. Like you said, we could name tons of examples. So do you have any closing thoughts that you might leave our listeners with when they're faced with this kind of cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, and even though this may be a terminology that the average person is not familiar with, it's obviously a psychological term that's used a lot within psychological therapy, and obviously in Christian therapy. Whether I use the term, I'm dealing with the issues. And so when you are challenged, because we all are challenged on a daily basis, when you're challenged with new ideas, thoughts, potential truths, because not everything that's presented to us is truthful. And it can still cause dissonance because we don't know whether it is or it isn't. Mm-hmm. So that's where it requires a real relationship with Jesus Christ to kind of help us to understand what to believe and what not to believe, okay? But when you're presented with these ideas and thoughts, these potential truths that you don't understand and you don't know what to do with and you don't know how to process, remember. Remember what Jesus says. I am the way, the truth, the life. You see, we're not to try to live the Christian life on our own anyway.
That's the challenge. Yeah, that's the challenge.
Christ is our life. Christ is the truth. So don't try to figure this thing out on your own. Don't try to figure theology out on your own. Live in harmonious relationship with Christ. He loves you. He cares for you. He doesn't see you after your fleshly struggles. So live in that harmonious relationship with Him, allowing Him to reveal what is truth, and then embrace it regardless of your understanding, and He will lead you in all truth. That would be my advice for you today.
Well, thanks, Tom.
And with that, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up for this video if you've enjoyed it. Share it with your friends. And don't forget to push that notification bell so you don't miss our videos when we upload them. Until next time, enjoy life as God intended. We hope you were encouraged and blessed by this video. We would love to have your feedback and interact with you. If you have a testimony that relates to today's discussion, please share it below in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that each time we upload a video that you'll be notified. Be sure to check out our blog on our website, which is in the description below. And until next time, may you experience life as God intended.